Welcome to Armchair Expert. I am Mike Ditka. Today we have one of my very, very favorite actors, and I've not heard him get interviewed a bunch. I'm sure you love him as well, Viggo Mortensen. Viggo Mortensen is an Oscar-nominated actor, writer, and director. I mean, he was fantastic in Green Book a couple years ago, Lord of the Rings Trilogy, and then my favorite, Captain Fantastic, who I'm trying to be like, Eastern Promises. He has a new movie, scored, written, directed, and starring Viggo. It's called Falling. Falling follows John dealing with the early stages of dementia in his conservative father. Now, we get into some really fascinating conversations about dementia and the experiences that Viggo has had. So please enjoy Viggo Mortensen.
He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert.
Are you in Spain?
Yes.
You're doing a full press tour from your den?
I have done some of it in Europe where they were open and then they closed places. And that was great, except for I sort of felt like I was the angel of death because every time I'd leave a country, they would close it down.
Now, I'm an enormous fan, Viggo. I'm obsessed with all things Sean Penn. I'm obsessed all things Bukowski, which led me to Sean Penn. And then, of course, Indian Runner. That was his first directing effort, I think.
Yeah.
And so I sprinted to the movie theater to see that. And of course, that's when I was introduced to you, and I promptly fell in love. I think you're so spectacular. And because I like you, I know that you don't do this, or at least I perceive that you don't do this. You're not much of a publicity machine, are you? Generally, do you try to avoid it?
I do the publicity. I don't do I'm not a big social media maven. I'm not a...
Maven.
I don't know. I'm not a...
Okay, so why I'm surprised this took so long is it's not like you just were pursuing acting for the last 30 years. You also are a painter and a writer and a poet and a million other things. So what that tells me is that you are super interested in being a part of the creation of something. So why did it take so long?
To direct?
Yeah.
It wasn't for lack of trying. First time I think I tried to get a movie made that I wanted to direct from a screenplay I'd written was... I think it was about 25 years ago. And I've tried many times with different screenplays I've written over the years. Even Falling took me 2-3 times, really, to finally get enough money. I didn't, when it came right down to it, I'd hoped for a 7-week shoot, and we ended up with 5. And we started shooting knowing, or I knew, I didn't tell the actors, but that we had enough for 2 weeks and we were going to keep looking. And, typical thing with independent movies. And 2 weeks in, my co-producer came over to me and said, "You got a minute?" And I go, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" And he says, "You can finish the movie." I go, "What do you mean finish the movie?" He goes, "You can finish shooting." I said, "Of course we're going to finish shooting. It's going good. It's going really well." He goes, no, I mean, you have the money. Oh, and I completely forgot. But no, sometimes you just have to go for it. I thought, I'm tired of waiting. It's not only 25 years, but it's been a few years with this movie. So I called up the cinematographer and Marcel, and I said, let's meet. Let's go to Canada. Let's go find these places. And let's start shooting.
Don't you think that's the gift, though? So there's all these hurdles of having no money and no time, but then I think the silver lining is like, everyone has so much more ownership of it because everyone knows what's on the line. Like everyone has to show up or it won't work. And there's some awareness of that. And then I think that just everyone having a stake in it just makes for such a unique experience. It's so special to be on a tiny thing that everyone has to show up.
Yeah, definitely. And especially, when you're shooting in difficult conditions. I mean, we're shooting in the dead of winter out in the middle of the countryside. And it was tough, and nobody's getting rich, So either they're really into it sincerely, or they're not, or they're griping, or But everybody pulled together, and it was really supportive. It was a great feeling.
Now you have a really, really interesting childhood in that you grew up in America for a period. Your dad's Danish, and then you moved to Argentina.
As an infant. I was born in New York City, and then as an infant, my dad got a job in South America, and then he got another job after that, and we stayed down there. Most of the first decade of my life, I lived in South America.
Okay, and so you must have a very complicated identity. Because so much of my story, I tell myself, is like, oh, I'm from Michigan. This is what we're like in Michigan. Auto industry, blah, 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 blah. But yours is such a quilt. And I just wonder, 0 to 10 is really formative. So do you identify more with that culture than ours? Or is it a weird amalgam because you came back to New York?
Well, kids adapt very quickly, you know. I have 2 younger brothers, Charles and Walter, that the movie's dedicated to. And they change even quicker. I mean, my Walter, the youngest, was 6. I was 11. And Charles was 8. When we moved, my parents split up and my mom moved back to where she's from, northern New York State. And when we were flying up there, you know, with my mom after this kind of acrimonious split, and my mom had explained to me, you know, we're going to be living with in the grandparents' house, and then we'll see what happens. And I said to Walter, the youngest, I said, okay, he had never spoken to me or to my mother or to anybody in any other language than Spanish, right? Even though he understood English. And my mom would complain. She would say to him, I remember one time he was probably about 4 and I was 9. And she said, you know, I want your brother to answer me in English. It makes no sense. I know he understands me because I ask him the question in English and he answers me perfectly in Spanish. So I went to him and I said, answer her in English, you know, just it's not that much to ask. He goes, no, it's a garbage language. I go, where did you get that? What are you talking about? He's 4 years old. It's a garbage language. Who told you that? Everybody knows it. I'm like, okay. But on the plane, I'm sitting with my brothers and I go, mom's asleep or whatever. And I said, we're going to have to speak English. Okay. But within a week, he was speaking perfect.
Yeah.
Like the slang, all the swear words from that moment, from that time, that place. Perfect adaptation. You know, I adapted too. And I thought I was completely in. But every once in a while, someone would say, that's weird how you write those letters or how you do this or how you use that word. What's that word mean? You know, I mean, so.
Yeah.
It's true that if I run into Argentine people, I'm like right back.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just what I was raised with. So that's true.
Well, I think I've heard you say that like speaking in Spanish for you is easier to get to the emotional center of what you're talking about than when you're speaking in English.
It depends what it's about. Certain kinds of poems or stories are maybe easier in Spanish. It depends. But I also have, you know, from my dad, and I lived some years there in Denmark too. I also have that. That's a different culture, different sense of humor.
And now you're in the role because you're the older brother. You got to help out. I've taken 4 of those trips in the car where we were leaving whatever dad just was there.
Yeah.
And then the little game plan talk, right? We're going to this place. You know, you're going to go to this school. Like, so I'm quite familiar with that. But I was the middle child, and I know it was on my brother. And I wonder when you're giving the speech on the plane, how fearful are you to be going to northern New York on the border of Canada? Are you afraid?
Part of it seemed like an adventure, but part of it was annoying because I had friendships.
Yeah.
You know, and this is a time, we're talking 1970. I was leaving behind for good. I mean, it wasn't like now. Everybody has iPhones. There was no internet. There wasn't even cable TV at that point.
Yeah, call would have been like $80 for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you could get through. And then on the TV, you know, it wasn't like I could email.
Yeah.
I knew I was saying goodbye for real to a lot of friends.
Your whole life. You were saying goodbye to every part of your life you knew.
Just the smells, the sounds, the language. Language is important, you know. And, you know, things that I cared a lot about, like football, soccer.
Mm-hmm.
But you adapt, you know. I mean, I have moved around quite a bit.
Did you play sports when you got to the States?
I started swimming, swam competitively. I like that.
That feels like a compromise. Yeah, I'll meet you halfway. How about I swim?
And I also was watching TV one day and I saw something I'd never seen, which was ice hockey. And I'm like, what the hell's that? And I'm trying to follow it. And I'm just like, it's kind of like soccer, but with sticks and really fast. And I got really into it. And at that time, the Montreal Canadiens were amazing. They were in their golden years. And I became interested in that. And that replaced soccer for me. So I became like a fanatical Canadiens fan and still am.
Do you hate the Red Wings?
No, I don't hate anybody.
Okay, so you loathe, can we say loathe them?
I'm partial to the original 6.
Okay, all right, that's fair.
But I'm not even in Argentina, it's like a matter of life and death. And it's gotten really bad, you know, so much so that even before the pandemic, you know, you could only have home fans. You couldn't have visiting fans because they would shoot each other.
Oh, yeah, yeah. A goalie got killed very famously, I think, when he got home.
I saw that game. That was the 1994 World Cup in Los Angeles. I was living there, and I went with my son, and that was United States beat Colombia. And the defender, it's just bad luck. A ball went off him and ricocheted, and the goalie couldn't stop it. It was an own goal. And when he got, I think you're referring to that, when he got back to Colombia, he was in whatever his hometown is, and he came out of a bar, and somebody just shot him for having let that goal in.
I mean, again,
it's crazy. Yeah.
Talk about, that's the power of identity right there, the in and out.
But I mean, whether it's sports or any other walk of life, I mean, look what the hell happened in the Capitol. You know?
Oh, yeah.
So that's no different than that insanity. But whether we're talking politics or sports, I think this thing of my team is extraordinary, it's the best team. It's like, well, it's the team I like the most, but it doesn't mean that I can't admire or even cheer when I see a great play by someone else.
I'm with you. I wear a Maple Leaf sweater all the time, and people get really upset because I'm from Detroit. And I love the Wings, but by God, I also like the Maple Leafs, and they got the best fucking merch.
I wouldn't go so far as to wear their sweater, I have to say.
I'm going to send one to you, and when you see that color in person, that blue.
I've seen it. I've shot in Toronto for David Cronenberg, and one thing I did on the first movie I did with him, History of Violence, is I would, whenever I had to do some kind of violent thing and I was off screen, I would put on the Canadian sweater in Toronto. And the crew would jeer and stuff. And so on the final day at Wrap, they gave me, signed by the entire crew, a Maple Leafs sweater, and I had to put it on for the photo. But I said, the only way I'll do this is if I can wear a cap, you know, a red Montreal Canadiens.
Well, if you're like Marie Kondoing your closet and you want to get rid of it, I'll shoot you my address because I'll wear the hell out of it and I'll take all the hate for it. I don't mind.
Really?
Yeah.
But I think that this thing that sports fans sometimes do where they take it too far. It's
the
like
tribalism, the you and me, and we're different because of this. That's where it breaks down for me.
And I think there's one thing I have to say that I feel, and it doesn't just happen in the United States, but it's one of the countries where it's noticeably a feature, almost an obligation for all politicians, no matter what stripe they are, to go on about American exceptionalism. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is not constructive because it's the same bullshit. It's no, the United States is great.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not greater than any other place. It's human beings. It's planet Earth.
Yeah.
You know, and you have a lot to be proud of. There's people that have come from all over the world that have contributed, science, arts, everything.
The scariest moment I ever had in my marriage is I asked my wife what was on her New Year's resolution list, and she said nothing. And I said, oh, so your work is done? I forget all the other stuff about how they compare relative to any other country. It doesn't matter to me. Again, I'm an addict, so it's like you start with, I have a ton of character defects. I'm going to try for the rest of my life to minimize those. So to start with, I'm exceptional is not a place where growth is going to follow, right? It means I got my shit together. If you met a gal at a bar and she said, oh, I'm perfect, you'd walk.
Well, it doesn't leave you anywhere to go. That's what you're...
No, you're saying this, well, this is the best it'll ever be. If I've already reached perfection, then that's it. We've capped out. We're done. We're done with the journey. Yeah. But while you were talking really quick, I think we had to have had the same shared experience, which is I did a movie really shortly after you guys wrapped Lord of the Rings. In fact, we had a lot of your hair and costume, which were the most lovely Kiwis. But I got insatiable for the All Blacks, and I had never seen rugby. But the haka, like what an awesome way to do everything we want to do. The ritualized hypermasculinity, the threats, the shit talk. But it's done in this way that is like, it's been made safe through centuries of the haka.
That's pretty big in Argentina too. So I grew up with that a little bit. And that was wonderful to be in during that long shoot. I went to see a lot of rugby and schoolboy rugby too. And even our crew, you know, the way someone might get out a pair of mitts and, you know, play catch during the lunch break on a crew. They would there was always a ball around and they would play rugby and get all muddy and stuff. And I even got shit for it one time because I did it in my costume and it was not a good thing.
Now, you love language. Did you ever ask any of the Maori guys what they were saying in the haka? They told me they're saying our dicks are bigger than yours. It's mostly about their dicks. which I was excited to learn.
Yeah, and I like, and it's also about fighting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna kill you, and I'm gonna eat you, and you know, whatever.
If I can get this cumbersome penis out of my way, I'm gonna eventually eat you.
Yeah, no, it's threatening. It's laying down the gauntlet, basically, but it's beautiful to watch. There was, I don't know if you saw the one they played. Argentina beat New Zealand for the first time in its history recently, a couple months ago, and the haka that they performed that day was right after Diego Maradona had died, the great soccer player, right?
Uh-huh.
And so they came out and they laid down a black shirt, like an all-black shirt, but with the name Maradona, number 10 on it. And they laid it down in front of the other team, which got them all emotional and, you know, the Argentines. And then they did the most aggressive haka I've ever seen. And then they beat them like 35-0. They kicked their ass. It's like, here you go, tender hearts, and then boom. So
it was kind of a Trojan horse.
Yeah, maybe so.
The best is when I was down there and the All Blacks played whatever the Tongan team was, and both teams are doing it at the same time. And I'm like, oh my God, if I could have been there to experience it coming from both sides, would have been something else. It's so cool. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this seems silly. And then midway through, I'm like, this is a little bit scary. And then by the end, I'm like, I would be terrified if I was on this field.
Yeah, it's beautiful, though. In rugby, it's kind of like they play really hard. They injure each other, but they kind of shake hands. There's something polite about it, strangely.
Yeah, very, very New Zealand, too. So after you went to college, you then lived in Denmark, which you just hinted at. In Copenhagen, you drove a truck. You lived in Spain. You lived in England. Do you have wanderlust? Were you just curious? Or having split your own life up to that point in two different places, were you on the search for, like, where do I want to be? Or is it just wanderlust?
Well, I like being in Denmark just because I was close to my cousins. We would visit them every couple of years, since I was, I think, 2, the first time I went there. And, you know, I learned the language, and I don't know, I had a very good relationship with all my cousins there. And there was a connection that I had with my Danish cousins that was particularly strong, and my aunts and uncles. And I really liked being there. And since my dad was Danish, it was something I wanted to explore and spend some time there. And I did. I lived there for a few years and worked there and had different jobs. And I liked being there. And I've continued to go back there a lot. You know, like when I watch the World Cup, I'm always hoping it'll be, I mean, you know, there's the U.S. sometimes is in the World Cup, and Denmark is often in the World Cup. Argentina is almost always there.
You're kind of lucky you have a lot of pokers in the fire. Like most of the games you could enjoy because you've lived there.
That's true. It's like I got 3 lotto tickets. No, but I mean, I was talking about exceptionalism, U.S. I mean, a lot of countries do that, some less than others.
Mm-hmm.
But in the U.S., it seems like it's almost, like I was saying, obligatory for politicians to use that phrase at some point. And if they don't, what's wrong with them? It's not productive. But anyway, because I've moved around a lot and been exposed to a lot of cultures and languages, I concluded a long time ago that it's more important how you are than where you are. Yeah, you can make friends anywhere, really. If you try a little bit, you can find something to appreciate about any place, any landscape, any culture. If you're open to it, you know, you only go around once, you might as well learn. And so there's a lot of places, obviously Argentina, obviously U.S., particularly, you know, the Northeast. But L.A., I lived there for a long time too, so I have a lot of feelings. And I've crisscrossed the country, road trips in the U.S. and Canada so many times that I know lots of states. There's lots of corners of North America that I really like and I'd love to go back to. But I feel that way about a lot of different places I've been. New Zealand, spent so much time there, and I drove everywhere. I never flew. I just wanted to stop, be able to go camping and fishing and do things and get to know people. And so the more places I go, the more places I feel like, yeah, I could live there. I could be happy here. And
what's the longest you ever lived somewhere? Have you done that math?
Well, now I would say, I lived in LA, actually. I lived in LA from 86 to about 2000 there.
And what was your pocket? Were you like a Silver Lake person? I want to stereotype you, and you're being very elusive, but what part of the city were you most at home in?
I was in Venice most of the time.
There we go. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Where do you live? You're in Los Angeles right now, right?
Yeah, Los Feliz, so right next to Silver Lake.
Where do you live?
Same. Yeah, we live 3 minutes apart by car, and I also just purchased a house that's 20 steps away from
Literally, our driveways now connect.
How does that feel?
Well, I haven't moved in yet. I have a lot of renovation to do, so we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see is the answer I'm sticking to.
We're thrilled about it.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're quite thrilled, my wife and I. This couldn't be better. We're trying to take over a whole pocket of Los Feliz. You're invited. It seems like I'd invite you just based on this conversation. You don't seem like an annoying neighbor that's going to trouble me for too many things.
Nah, I keep to myself a lot.
Yeah. Okay. The reason I want to know about all the moving around, because I was going to say I have the opposite reaction to kind of a similar childhood where we moved a lot and I restarted so much that I've been in our current house for 16 years. It's the longest I've lived anywhere by a factor of like 8. And we're just about to move to a new house. My wife's idea. It's only 1,000 feet from our old house, and that's still scaring me a little bit. And I just never wanted to. I have wanderlust. I love going places and having like a month experience or 3, but I think I craved the roots. And I'm basically being surgically removed from our current house.
Are you homesick for your childhood homes?
Only one of them. I have this very rose-colored glasses view of a certain house I lived in Milford, where I met my best friend, where I became who I think I still mostly am. And yeah, that place holds. I would have stayed there forever, maybe.
And are you still friends? Is he still alive, that guy?
He's at my house. He's 1,000 feet away. I sent him to treatment last year. He's a year sober. We're back in business. It's fucking awesome.
Dax just keeps all the people he likes like within 10 feet.
Ideally.
That's good.
Do you have any childhood friends that you still pal around with?
From Argentina, I did lose touch with them. I know at least 2 of them didn't make it through what happened in the 70s down there.
Oh, wow.
I don't know exactly what happened, but there's one that now lives in England that I've talked to, and we communicate a little bit. But that was a real severing when we went to northern New York. And by the time communication and internet, all that thing happened, it was, too late. And it took me a long time before I went back to Argentina, many years. I didn't go back for 25 years, maybe. But when I went back, even though now there were McDonald's and there was all these other things, it still was the same. It still smelled the same. The people talked that way. Even on the plane flying back 25 years later, it was exciting. It was like, wow. I stayed up all night just listening to them, talking. I was like, oh, this is so familiar.
Yeah, it's in your cells.
And every word, every aspect, as soon as I landed, this sort of heat, this humidity, and the music on the radio and walking around the street, it was just wonderful. And I found a car from some guy. It was kind of like a half-assed rental car. It wasn't, I don't know how much of a company it was. He probably had like 2.5 cars. But I got the half car. And no spare and kind of iffy. But I took it and I did a massive road trip, for days and days around the country. And I went to places I remembered going to as a kid, farms we lived on that area. And it was really wonderful to go back. But it was funny that people would say, where are you from? What are you? Because they said, well, you talk like my grandfather. And because in 25 years, my swear words, all my slang was from
old
my
as
left.
hell. Yeah.
And my sort of sentence structures was that of an 11-year-old boy, not a 36-year-old man, So, yeah, it was interesting. Sorry, I went off on that tangent.
No, I love it. What I'm detecting is that you and I have, I think, an opposite batch of fears. So I think what I immediately know about you is you have a comfort with being untethered, or it seems like you have a comfort. So just the fact that my best friend Aaron Weekly is 1,000 feet away, I am happiest next to him because I remember exactly who either I think I am, wanna be, whatever it is. I can't live without that. And it goes to the houses and wanting to be in the same place. And I'm thinking of your life and I'm filled with anxiety about how gracefully you wisp around the globe And I just can conclude we must have completely opposite fears.
Maybe. I'm not afraid of it. I mean, I have nostalgia.
Are you afraid to be alone? Do you mind being alone?
No, I crave it. I crave it.
Okay. You don't need approval every 5 minutes like I do?
I can spend 2 weeks, and I've done this many times, where I don't even talk to anyone on the phone. And I realize maybe after a few days, I haven't said anything. So maybe I'll sing a song. I don't want to lose my voice. No, I don't mind. I'm happy. But I think that, memory is a tricky thing. And that's, in our movie, that's something that's really important. And I think that what we do with what we remember, it's more a collection of feelings than it is a collection of facts. Because, we think, the present is confusing, never more so than now, of course, but it's always, it's in flux. It's kind of developing. It's undefined, the present. The future is completely unknown. Obviously, it hasn't happened. So we tend to think, well, at least the past, I've got videos, I've got photo albums, I've got diaries. But you're telling the story from a point of view. You're taking the picture from a point of view. Everything's a point of view. And those things evolve. I think we try to control the past without even thinking about it so that we can be comfortable in the present. You know what I mean?
We're constantly trying to make sense of the present day with this data set from the past, which, as you point out, is the most subjective thing in the world. My brother and I will be arguing about, like, it happened in a different house. And it's like, how could you not remember it? And it's like,
it was summer, or you weren't even there. Yes, I was.
Yes, and you just start realizing, like, oh, this is the most flawed. I can't even believe they allow human testimony in a court of law, because I know from my own experience, it's so deeply flawed. And you're right, I'm more latched onto a version that helps me make sense of why I'm here today feeling this way.
I think everybody does that. I mean, I think to some degree everybody does that.
And you got to wonder with dementia then, if that's not what you're accumulating to define why you're here today, it must be, I can only imagine, it must be terrifying.
Well, dementia is something, I mean, there's a couple reasons I wanted to write this story, Falling. And one of them, and I was, in fact, I had another screenplay and I had raised some of the money. I was in the middle of doing that when I got the idea to write this one. And it was right after my mother's funeral. She had dementia. And that's something I've seen up close, and even in a caregiver kind of role, several times. Both my parents, my stepdad, 3 of my 4 grandparents, aunts, uncles. I've seen it a lot, and with my mother and father especially. When she passed away, I was, as you do, somebody you care about dies, there's a lot of things that are present that aren't normally present on a daily basis, just things she said or images of her. And you're looking at photographs, you're trading stories. And I was hearing stories that I was familiar with, but like you say, there's slightly different versions.
Yeah, by a different director. Same script, different director.
We were all there, but that's interesting you put it that way. Well, and stories I hadn't known. So I thought, that's interesting. And I started writing them down. On the way home, I wanted to remember these things. And it made me think how, like you say, how subjective memory is. When I looked at these notes, I thought, this is an interesting structure for some kind of story, maybe a short story. Jumping around in time, different people's points of view. What is at stake for one person in a memory that isn't at all important to another person? And so they have different versions, all that kind of stuff. And so I started writing this story, and then it ends up being a fictional family. I started writing it thinking about my mother, and it became Falling, which is mostly made up. It ends up, instead of being about this woman, it ends up being about a father and son mostly. But for me, the heart of the story of Falling is the mother. She's what they're mostly arguing about, how they remember her, how one thinks the other one's disrespecting her, whatever. And same with Laura Linney, who plays my sister in the story. Her relationship with the father, they butt heads or have differences of opinion based on the memory, the differing memories of our mother,
Yeah.
So the dementia aspect, that's what Willis suffers from, the character Lance Henriksen plays. I wanted to, with the help of hopefully a really good actor, which I got in Lance Henriksen, and then the tools that you have in filmmaking, I wanted to get across what it's like for a person like that, how that looks, but also how that feels to some degree for them as best I could. And even in the really good movies, and there's 1 or 2 this year that deal with dementia as well, and there have been several good portrayals of that, dementia or Alzheimer's, over the years. But the one thing that I've always felt that I thought we could do something else with or that didn't at least reflect my personal experience, was that they generally show these people that have dementia as being confused for the most part, right? And if they show their point of view, it's that of a confused person by and large. And in my experience, the people who are confused are the observers for the most part. They're not confused because they're really seeing, feeling, and hearing those things. That is their present. Whether you like it or not, they're there. They're happy or sad, but they're there. They're not confused. When they do tend to get confused is if you correct them. You know, like, you know, I can give you examples, like, you know, for example, like maybe my father is talking to me. He says, you know, I had lunch with Harry and he's not looking so good. And I know that Harry died 37 years ago. And your instinct is to say, well, Dad, you know, Harry's been gone a long time, you know that. And you're thinking you're helping. And then they get not only confused, but upset because Harry dies again.
Oh, right.
Among other things. And it's an instinct that you want to correct them. But you have to, after realizing that that's not a good idea, that you've only upset them, then you have to ask yourself, who am I doing this for?
Oh,
I'm doing it for me. It's my ego. I want him to be the way he was. I don't want him to make these mistakes. You know what I mean? But no, it's a selfish need to correct. And it's just a learning experience that you have to adapt. In any relationship, you have to adapt to that other person as they evolve. And with someone who has dementia, if you really want to be helpful with them, you have to give up. You have to sacrifice what you wish they were because they're not going to be that way anymore. And make them happy. So what do? So he's just said, you know, Harry and we had lunch and he doesn't look so good. So instead of saying Harry's dead, you say, what did you guys have for lunch?
Right.
And then you have a conversation. Now you have to give up your mind. That's not real and you're lying or it's weird. It doesn't have to be. If they're happy, give the other person what they need in any relationship, but especially someone that has dementia.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
I got to say, so the lesson I learned once, thank God, and then I got to apply it the second time, was my dad died of lung cancer, and I was the guy taking care of everything. And I was trying to like, Dad, why are you eating this fucking hamburger? You know, you're not supposed to do that. You know, why are you doing this? I tried very hard to, you know, give him the best shot possible. And after he died, my only regrets, because I was there, I felt good about the whole thing, was just like, why did I waste 30 minutes of that last 4 months arguing about a hamburger? What a fucking waste, right?
Nagging him, yeah.
And then, so then my stepfather died of cancer a year and a half ago, and I approached that one with like, this is his deal. He'll pick treatment he wants. I'll have no opinion of that. If he doesn't want to do this, that's cool. It's his thing. I'm just here to kind of be present. And it went so much better taking that approach. But I would imagine it's then just an extra step harder with dementia because, again, you have the illusion that you'd be helping. Like, no, Dad, Henry's dead. Let's keep it on track here. We got to, you know, you think you're letting someone slip further into this disease, but it's the same thing as arguing about a fucking hamburger.
It's silly, yeah. And the best thing you can be, but that's any relationship, is flexible, right? I mean, adapt to them. Every person's different every day, no matter whether they have dementia or not. And people who have dementia, I've seen, like my stepfather was a very soft-spoken, friendly, good sense of humor. He was just easy, right? And when he got it, he was like Gollum from the Lord. He was just like, his eyes bulged. He wouldn't eat, so he was very skinny, and he was a holy terror. He would do crazy stuff. He would get up in the middle of the night and put on 2 or 3 ties and 3 coats, and then he'd go outside, and then, you know, a neighbor would call my mom at 3, 4 in the morning and say, your husband's here. Where? And then he'd be like 4 blocks away, and he was like shoveling their sidewalk or sweeping their, you know, doing something.
Yeah.
Just great. But then when somebody would confront him, he would get really angry. Even at the very end, I mean, she couldn't anymore. We had to find a place for him because my mom wasn't getting any sleep, you know. And we would go there, and he was tough. He was tough for the people there. There was a period towards the end, he wouldn't eat. He wouldn't let them wash him. He'd let nothing. And he would let me, but I had to do tricks. You know, I would show him a picture of my mom, you know, like when they met. And he would go, oh, she's pretty lady, you know, like that. And he'd be looking at her, and I would start feeding him cookies or something. And then I would eventually get him to, and then I'd say, yeah. And then I would get him to eat food. And then I would talk to him about whatever I could figure out that he would be interested in. And so he trusted me to, not always, but usually enough to where he would let me wash him and stuff.
Yeah.
But he would get up. Happens a lot to men. I guess women as well. But especially men. When they lose that inhibition, they get really kind of horny and grabby, right?
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
he was famous for it. He would get up. One night he got into the bed of some lady who had even worse dementia than him. He got in there and he was...
It never ends for women. It just never ends.
And he was going for it.
There's no finish line. You think I end up in a nursing home, no one's going to want anything to do with me.
And he was all over her. And it was, noisy. And so a nurse comes in, and she was probably 23, 24, young, strong. She came in and she tried to get him out. She grabbed his arm. And even though he was literally a skeleton at that point, he was so thin, he just did this move on her. He grabbed her arm and he went like that and he broke her arm.
Oh my God.
Wow.
This tough young woman. And I wasn't there at that moment, but I was there right after. And then when I saw her again, she came back to work with a cast on. And I said, I'm so sorry. She goes, it happens. I shouldn't have reached so suddenly. I mean, not everybody would say that, but she was saying it was on her because she startled him, like you would a dog or something.
That's
just
kind
go
of
in
her.
slow.
Yeah.
Very kind of her. But he was like that. He was completely nuts. My dad was a difficult character, fun and could be humorous and a good storyteller, but he was not always easy, right? And he
Mercurial, we'd call him in the 50s.
Yeah, and he could be domineering and stuff. But when he got well into dementia, he became very gentle. He was like a child. And he did a weird thing too, even though he'd lived since the 1950s in the United States, mostly Argentina and then the United States, had not lived in Denmark anymore. And he started speaking Danish only, right?
Whoa.
And not just Danish, but Danish from when he was a kid. So it was weird, old Danish, like accent and vocabulary, just like me when I went to Argentina, right?
Yeah.
But he was like a kid. And it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't know who they're going to remember or not, or how they're going to remember him. And he would talk to me, and he clearly thought I was his dad sometimes. The thing is that if you're open to it and you're not terrified and you just give up trying to make them be something, which we all need to do anyway in life, just let people be who they are. Try to figure them out rather than before you start thinking how they should be. And I would learn all kinds of things that I would have never learned. There was a period where he was talking to me. He sounded like a little kid. And it's like, I didn't do it. I didn't let the pigs out. And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? He kept going on about this. And I called his sister, my aunt in Denmark. I said, he sounds like he's about 10, 11 maybe. Did he let some pigs out? What happened? She goes, oh, yeah. Yeah, it was right at the beginning of the war. Things were tight as far as, rationing with food and all that. And so the garden, the vegetable garden was really important. And he was alone one day on the farm, and he forgot to close the door to the barn. A pig got out, pigsty, and destroyed the garden in minutes.
Oh, boy.
But he never copped to it. And this is something that had happened 74 years ago, earlier. And then one day he goes, I did do it. I did. He admitted this to me.
Oh, my God. He unburdened himself.
And I was his dad. And I said, it's okay. We're fine. Look, you're fine. I'm fine. We had something to eat. We just had dinner. The pigs didn't get it all. We're good. But it was like, if you're open to it and you're not just like, oh, this is too weird.
It's almost like a priest. You could absolve someone of this guilt.
But you can also learn things that you'll never learn about your family. I would have never known that story if that hadn't happened.
Well, I think of the stuff I'd tell my brother and not my kids. Yeah, like if my daughter, if I think my daughter's my brother at some point, she's going to hear some new shit.
Maybe some scares. No, my mom told me all kinds of stuff. There was another time where my dad was talking about, we can't leave the old people out in the snow. In Danish, right? We can't. The old people are waiting by the station. I'm like, what station? He goes, Justrup, the name of this town. And I was like, so I called my aunt again. And I said, what the hell is it? What's the deal with this? She goes, there's no station in that town. She goes, yes, but there was one until early 50s or I don't know. There was a local train that used to go through there. And that was probably because we had visitors from this island where, my grandparents came from, and they were coming to visit. And so they'd taken 2 trains and they were waiting to be picked up. Beginning of the war, they were, gasoline rationing. So they would have gone horse and cart to pick them up, wagon. And so now I knew what he was talking about, that these people were waiting at the station in a snowstorm. He brought it up again the next night. I said, I'll go get him. Okay. So I went out to the kitchen. I made myself, a cup of coffee or something, and waited a few minutes. And then I went back in thinking he's either going to forgot it, which could happen, or he'll bring it up again. And so I walk in and he goes, well, what happened? And I said, even though I'd been gone 2 minutes, there's no way I could have gone to the station with the horse.
Right.
So I said, I picked them up. It's a long trip. They were tired, but they're fine. They had a couple sandwiches and some soup. They said they were really tired and they're going to bed and that they would see you for breakfast. And he said, excellent, thank you. So,
wow.
You could, but I learned a story about him and we had some fun. And just because for me, that's not real.
Yeah.
Whereas it is for him, who am I to say? If we're saying that memory is subjective anyway, why is the present that a person with dementia completely believes in and feels profoundly, why is that any less legitimate than my view of the present?
Yeah, it's wild. Well, thank you for giving so much of our time. I got to say 2 more things. One, I fucking love Captain Fantastic. I am modeling my own parenting after Captain Fantastic, for better or worse. We're going to find out. But the level of honesty, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I like to do. Like, here's what it is,
Very good writer-director, Matt Ross. I can't wait till he makes another movie. He did a great job with that.
Oh, it was so spectacular. I just loved it. Yeah. And now my very last question, and it's an actor-to-actor question. So the most famous scene you've ever been in your life, I'm sure, is the naked fight scene in the bathhouse, which I'm sure you've talked about a million times. I hate to bring it up again, but I watched that going, okay, so let's say I had been cast instead of him, and we're going to do this. So I'm going to make up my mind, like, we're doing this, and I'm going to go all the way. But high probability of failure in that scene, in a way. I mean, it's a big swing, and it's it's so memorable. You feel so vulnerable in that fight. Like, oh, this would be the worst place in the worst situation ever to have to fist fight. And I just wonder, your faith in Cronenberg just has to be like, yeah, I trust him. This is the right scene. I just wondered was it any harder to commit to that one than other scenes? Or you were like, no, we're fucking doing this.
No. I mean, I remember, we worked out the choreography ahead of time because we had to. I mean, it was like you would with any stunt scene. When it was written, it just said they have this fight in a bathhouse. And so when we showed him the choreography that we worked up, a week or 2 before. And I said, I was thinking about the scene. I mean, practically speaking, I can be sitting there like everybody else, with a towel on, but that towel's not going to realistically stay on in this fight. No. So why not just not even try to do that? And he goes, makes sense. I mean, that's just the way when it falls off, whatever, if you do this in continuity, that's where it falls off. And, so it was more just practical concerns about it. And I would probably do things with him or even stories that are strange, that I might not trust another director with. That scene was tricky to orchestrate and perform. And there was also the practical thing. Once we'd done several takes, he got all these, masters basically. Then he said, we do have to do a couple of pickup shots, some close shots of some details tomorrow. So we'll have to repeat some of it. And I'm like, okay. And then the next day I was so bruised that it took them longer to cover the bruises than it did to put all those tattoos on, actually. But those were just logistical things. I wasn't really freaked out about it or concerned about it going in. I mean, because maybe like you say, because I trusted him, but it just seemed to make sense that this would have to be done that way.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know how to articulate it, but the odds are you get a couple naked men fighting. It could just go wrong so easily. It could be laughable. You could be like, what the fuck am I watching? That's what I mean by the probability of failure. It was a very fine margin that scene was pulled off as excellently as it was.
I mean, I think David was committed and I was committed. To me, it was like fighting for my life. That's what it was about.
No, it was awesome. It's the most memorable fight scene ever. It's incredible.
I hope you get a chance to work with him someday. He's a fun person to be around. He's very smart, and he's got a great sense of humor. And he's a really good director. I mean, he's the kind of director who will leave you alone. He trusts the people he casts and gives them room. And
That's
he's open
nice.
to feedback from everybody. So
Yeah.
I hope you get to meet him.
Well, listen, I've loved talking to you.
Likewise.
I had a hunch I would never bump into you at a Hollywood event, so I'm glad this happened.
You never know. Small
You
world.
know, that's true. You don't know. All right. Well, great luck with Falling. It comes out February 5th on VOD everywhere.
Yes.
So everyone should check that out. I'm excited for you.
Lance Henriksen, a performance that will long live in memory. I guarantee you won't regret seeing him, whether he horrifies you or not. It's an amazing acting job. See the movie for Lance, if nothing else.
Well, I can see it for both of you.
All right.
I don't have to pick.
Fair enough. Anyways, nice to meet both you guys.
Yeah. Take
Nice
care of
to
you.
meet
Go.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
And now my favorite part of the show, the fact check with my soulmate, Monica Padman.
We have a lot of housekeeping.
Oh.
Tons.
Okay.
Two big things.
All right.
We watched separately two big pieces of media this week.
Mm-hmm.
Britney Spears documentary, Framing Britney Spears.
Which is a New York Times documentary. So it's like, it's really tastefully done.
Yeah.
I think when I maybe heard of it at first, I assumed it would be salacious. I don't even know what I thought. I just, generally, if they make things about her, I'm nervous. It's an incredible documentary. It's on Hulu. Everyone should watch it.
Yes. It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, and it is so illuminating the fog in which we all lived in. Me, having lived through the whole thing with today's set of glasses, was just flabbergasted at the level of misogyny that was just commonplace in every interview. People asking her about her boobs. People are asking her if she's a virgin.
She has to walk this tightrope of being polite, and everyone talking about the way she dresses and how bad that is for girls. Like
A wife of like a senator saying she would shoot her if she could. And, you know, even back, R.I.P., love Ed McMahon, but even back to her appearance on Star Search when she's like an 8-year-old little girl. And he goes, "Do you have a boyfriend?" And she goes, "No." He goes, "Why?" And she goes, "Boys are mean." She's so spunky and fun.
Yeah, she is.
And he goes, "What about me? I'm not mean. Can I be your boyfriend?" Which was so innocuous back then when I watched stuff like that. I didn't even think about it.
I know.
But now I'm looking at this 8-year-old little girl having to explain to a grandpa why they shouldn't be boyfriend girlfriend. It was so.
And then she just says, "It depends."
Yeah.
It's so sad. Like, oh my God. And
You said it the best. You watch this person get chiseled.
yeah.
Like from the jump. Just chiseled.
Until she's nothing.
Yeah.
It is so worth watching. I think it's a really good cautionary tale. Me and you had a little bit of this discussion. You know, this idea that everyone has to walk on eggshells and that you could get canceled at any moment for something you say that's wrong. Like, that's scary, and I don't like that. But it is the pendulum swing from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not to the middle yet, but I'm glad the pendulum has swung in a way that is going to prevent if someone said what Ed McMahon said to a little girl on TV now, he'd get skewered.
Yeah, there'd be blowback.
Yeah, and I'm happy about that. I'm happy that people are dissecting.
Well, even too,
wrongdoing.
like this has happened in a few documentaries we've watched recently where they go back to late night talk show monologues.
Yeah.
And man, they never aged that well. And there was one where the talk show host was saying, like, you know, guys always want to know, like, who should they pick? Should they pick the nice girl that's a good mother, or should they pick the little slut or something? And it said slut, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And again, I would watch that stuff in that era, and that didn't even occur to me that was insane.
I know. And that, I guess that's what we have progressed. And I think part of the reason we progress is because people have been put in a corner too a little bit. And I'm happy about that, because that stuff is just so unacceptable. And it's not just men. It was women. It was Diane Sawyer, who I mean is a legend and amazing, but everyone just lived in that world.
It was society. That's why I always kind of say, like, you got to look at the systems. The little monkeys involved in the systems can only be so responsible. It's like the whole
Exactly.
The water everyone's swimming in is the problem. Oh, it's gut punchy, so much of the stuff. And then also when Britney famously attacked that car with the umbrella, I was thinking how different it'd be if it had been me, that would have happened years before.
Yeah.
I would have snapped. Like I would have felt from my childhood trauma, I would have felt like I'm about to be molested. Even though I'm not going to be molested, I would have that same feeling of powerlessness and I will not let someone do this to me. And I would have snapped years before that. I would have punched people and probably the narrative would not have been, I went crazy. It would have been, he fought back.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't be that I was weak and snapped and was hysterical. It would have been, I fought back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so depressing.
It is. And, the whole Free Britney movement is interesting. We don't know the details, and I don't know whether she needs a
conservator
or not, whether she needs one or not. I do think it is another layer of misogyny because there are there are plenty of male actors who are crazy.
Yeah, like Martin Sheen didn't take charge of Charlie Sheen during the whole meltdown.
And like that, it's because she's a woman and she was a girl, and we think that women and girls can't handle themselves when they're in the middle of an emotional situation. It's just the layers.
Yeah, I didn't leave with conviction about whether she should or shouldn't be a part of a conservatorship. What was
Conservator. It's like legal conservator.
Yeah. I didn't leave with that because as many of the lawyers said, like, you don't know what you don't know. I don't know if she's tried to kill herself 8 times and her life is in danger without that. We don't know the details.
But it's also like chicken or the egg. Like, let's say that's even true. Let's say she has had suicide attempts. Is it because she's crazy or is it because this made her crazy?
Right.
Her entrapment,
Yeah. But I guess the only reason I brought that up is I don't really have a conclusion because I don't know nearly enough to make a statement like that. But the documentary is so illuminating outside of that question.
Yeah.
And what we accept with this whole paparazzi thing, like the fact that we could all fall in love with someone's talent and light and then say, and yeah, we should live in a society where 350 people should mob that person physically every time. There's footage of like those paparazzi getting in like crazy fist fights right next to her where she almost got hit. And the notion that we accept that is so crazy to me. I know I'm predisposed to hate that, but I even know that before I had any experience with it, I thought it was grotesque.
Yeah. And if you just are unaware, I do think this is an enlightening movie to watch or doc to watch because literally I had to put my hand up over my eyes because I truly was like, I'm at risk of having a seizure if I stare at this because of the flashing.
Yeah.
And that's me watching a movie. That's her life. I could not. It's so sickening.
I don't think it's too far to go to say it's an assault. Like they were publicly assaulting
100%.
her and we were all like, oh, freedom of the press.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I know.
That wears so fucking thin to me. Freedom of the press on that.
And there's a paparazzi in the doc who is interviewed. And I mean, I find that so interesting too. Also, simulation, Bader-Meinhof frequency illusion, ding, ding, ding. Because we had just talked about this recently. We were talking about Punk'd and how.
Oh, sure.
And then
where's the line?
Where's the line?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And this guy is on there, and you can see that his brain is preventing him from seeing the reality, which is that he was a part of something that ruined a human.
And he has some awareness of it, like the way he's participating in it. Yeah. There's a certain level of responsibility he can accept before I think it would shatter his self-image of himself.
Yes, exactly. He comes in and out because he's like, well, first he says like, I don't think when you're in it, you really can understand what they're going through. He says that, but then he basically said it was a mutual.
Oh, yeah. This is the fucking thing I hate the most about paparazzi is they need us and we need them.
That's what he said.
That is not true. Britney Spears was a fucking star from her singing and dancing, not from you following her. What a bogus.
You also see on the video, like we see a lot of clips of her being like, "Can you leave me alone? Can you leave me alone?" And then we cut to the interview and he says, she never told us to leave her alone. And the interviewer says, what about when she said, leave me alone? And he said, well, she just meant for that day.
Right.
Not forever.
Right.
And he, like, his brain has to think that.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking and I wanted to be friends with her.
I know. And I started to get really panicked by the end because they're basically saying, like, you kind of can't get to her because of this situation she's in where she has these legal guardians. They kind of vet everything. And I was like, oh my God, like she can't even tell her story. This is like other country shit.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something we should allow in the United States.
It's a very good documentary.
I would highly recommend. I mean, it's not even that it's a good documentary. I think it's should be sort of required watching for like empathy and to see that side of this industry and what we do to people and women.
It's the same as the tiger
women.
thing too. All these things fall into this narrative where we love to build someone up and then we can't wait for them to crash. And it's so sick that we're that. We're all like that.
It is. It is.
It's like there's some part of us that's like, no one deserves that much adulation. So now I want it to swing the other way and them to get humbled. There's something interesting. So I think there's some programming in our brain that wants us to regulate who's getting too much power for that reason.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also we're so hardwired to want stories so that we can make sense of things. So like, yeah, this is the teen idol story and this is the crazy woman story and that like we just need all these boxes and it's so hard to see all the facets of what's going on. And I also think our brains want so badly to be looking up to someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we both desire.
We need a model,
an alpha.
But then our brains check themselves. I shouldn't care this much about them, and so it swings in the other direction. We can't just have any like moderate.
I think we desire
thoughts.
A leader. Like we desire someone that we all trust to defer to.
Yeah,
but we do not want that entity to have too much control. So it's like this balancing
But we do
act.
until we don't.
Exactly. You know, as we get into gene editing and CRISPR and all this stuff, I wonder if they'll start I don't know how you experiment on people, but kind of removing some of the stuff that ails us so much because we live so differently than we were designed to live. So the reward center for eating, like will they choose to augment that so we don't have the desire to overconsume at all times? Will they fix this status obsession in us because we're a social primate?
But it benefits people too. Like it's gonna change everything if that were to happen, and probably a lot of bad ways.
But we do have all this hardwiring that's not serving us anymore. Like the fact that we did have to be on high alert all the time when we have this whole nervous system designed to dump cortisol and adrenaline so you can run from a lion. Well, no one has to run from a lion anymore. And so we're carrying all that chemistry around, and people with anxiety, it's like some of it's there isn't a big threat. So you're looking for a threat.
But there are threats.
There are threats, but not like early man dealt with.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're walking down a dark alley and you're a woman, like that, you need that lion quality, fear of lion quality to be spiked.
I agree, but like 0.00001% of your life will be walking down a dark alley. And then you're left with the rest of your life where you're just in your house, all that chemistry is working out these fears that aren't really plausible fears.
But I don't think you could just cut out like fear of lion attacks. Like you'd be cutting out fear.
Well,
and you can't.
I guess what I'm saying is, will they be able to dial it to give you an appropriate amount of fear for living in this society? So only 0.00001% are going to get attacked and killed by another human being. Now, 30% of people are going to die of heart disease. They're not too afraid of that.
Right.
So none of it's actually related to the real threats, whereas it used to be.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if they could dial it.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. If you live in a context where you have a 50% chance of getting killed by a lion, you probably should be on high alert all day long.
Right.
But if you live in Beverly Hills in a house and you only go to Whole Foods, you probably don't need to be carrying that level of adrenaline around with you.
Right.
But it's just the same body.
Yeah. But the Britney thing kind of connects to the other piece of media that we consumed this week that I could not recommend more. In and of itself, a magic show that's on Hulu.
It was a stage show that ran for like 534 days or something in New York, and then they filmed it.
Yes, thank God.
They did a great job filming it, by the way.
They did. And that is hard to do, especially a magic show. It is beautiful. It is not your average magic show. Like it's a storytelling show. It's
an identity exploration piece.
It is. And yeah, identity is such a huge theme in it, and what we think of ourselves, what other people think of us, what other people choose to not think about us. And it tied to the Britney thing. For me, I felt like everyone just sees her as this one thing, and they refuse to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, an archetype.
Yeah. It's incredible. It is incredible, the show.
The thing I was most excited about watching it was thinking how much you were going to like it.
Oh, my God. It was just a confluence of all the things I like. I mean, obviously, I love magic, and I love the topics he was exploring, and also just the way it was at. I mean, I was crying from like 5 minutes in. I was just crying the whole time. Magic makes me scared and happy and excited and scared. Just so much wonder.
I would give anything to feel about magic the way you do. It would be really fun. It's funny, I was talking about it with Kristen afterwards because she loved it so much as well. And I said, us people are who we are. Like, you can aspire to get rid of some of your character defects, blah, blah, blah. But we also, there are types of people. And I am a type of person where, and again, because of my history, there's a manipulation. It's not true. And it results in an emotion. And that to me is just a trigger. You don't see that? Magic is a manipulation. It is a tricking your senses. It's deception. And that's what's cool about it. And when it's just to go like, oh, cool, that thing disappeared. I didn't think that could disappear. I don't really have any reaction to it. But when it's that then elicits emotions, it like triggers all this stuff in me.
But you could choose to see it as all of these things that I'm walking around in the world thinking are real and right and exact. Maybe they're not. And that's exciting. That doesn't have to be manipulation. That doesn't have to be scary. I mean, that's like shrooms. When you take shrooms and you're walking around and you're like, oh my God, there's a version of the world that's this. That's tricking your brain. That's making chemicals release that don't normally release. And it resulted in a lot of emotion for me. So to me, it's the same thing. It's just like, oh my God, we're so obsessed with the tangible world in the way we know it. And there are versions of this world that are magical. And I love that. It's how I think it's a choice in how you choose to see it.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
For me, there isn't magic. So everything that happened was a trick that he performed beautifully. The guy's so talented. But they were all tricks. None of it was real. And on shrooms, it's the same reality. And you are interpreting it differently. You're in charge of the manipulation, not another human being.
Well, I was not in charge.
You were. Your brain was.
My brain was in charge, but I myself was not. I couldn't stop it if I wanted to stop it. I couldn't do anything like that. Like,
oh, I'm not arguing that you had control. What I'm saying is it was your own brain that was seeing these other layers that do exist. Like, you didn't see anything. What you saw is how light enters your brain. And if it enters your brain in one state, it assembles a bush in this way. But if your brain is accessing another part of itself, it assembles it this way. And you can't say which one's real.
Well, people have hallucinations on these things. That's not real.
I'm not saying it. Well,
that's the same thing. That's an illusion. That's something your brain is creating in that moment. That's not existing in
your sober moment.
It's not existing to a person next to me who, and even if that person is on shrooms, it's probably not existing. Like everyone's reality, I guess I like the fact that it's questioning reality.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool.
It's so beautiful. I think the message is so beautiful.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. Can you see what I'm saying about everyone starts crying? And they're crying because of a trick you performed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the part that's triggering for me.
But I don't see it like that. I see that you see that as a trick. Everyone's crying because they think they bought into a trick.
Uh-huh.
But they can choose, and they are, to not feel like they're being tricked. They can choose to feel like they're being seen.
Right. But
and that's a beautiful thing.
There is a reality that they're not being seen.
Do you think they're happier having felt tricked or having felt seen?
Right. So this is all I'm saying. This is why there's so many different people in the world. And some people, like you, which I'm envious of, can forget that part and enjoy the emotional part of it, which is beautiful. And then for people like me who were manipulated so often to give me an emotion that was bullshit, it was a trick, I will always be on guard against that.
But that's kind of the whole point of this whole thing is like you have this identity about yourself. It is steadfast and there's nothing that can change it and it's you. But you have choices. You can decide whether that's the truth about you moving forward. I mean, of course,
I disagree.
Okay.
That's like you saying, telling you can decide you didn't feel like you were the only brown person in your friendship group. You can't decide that.
You
that
told me
is
during shrooms, you said you have a choice in how you choose to feel this experience.
Uh-huh.
And I felt horrible.
Uh-huh.
And I felt so fearful and so scared and so out of control. And when you said that, I was like, that's exactly right.
Uh-huh.
I can choose in this moment to override some of that wiring.
Uh-huh. Yeah. The fear.
And I did.
Yeah.
And
it was awesome.
We have that ability. I'm not saying it's easy.
So here's the thing I'm bumping up against that's making me emotional in this argument is I see you, I see how much you enjoy it, and I see why.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
And the way I'm experiencing it is true to me. And you're trying to tell me that that's my choice and that I should be doing it differently.
I'm not saying you should be.
Okay.
I'm saying if you're envious, that means you would want it to be different. And if you want it to be different, I'm telling you it can be. If you're saying I'm totally content with that, then great. Then you can be totally content with that. You're saying you wish
I would
you could
love
see it
to
like me.
Yeah, I would love to experience the emotion, but unfortunately, because of my history, I can't. I am on high alert for people that are lying to elicit an emotion out of me. And that is who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to change that. Just like you hate the idea of anyone talking behind your back more so than other people do. And it's because you had great reason to wonder if when you left your 5 white girlfriends that they talked about you being brown. That was a real legitimate thing to wonder.
Right. I think maybe that was subconscious. Yeah. But yes, I have wiring in that way. Yes.
Yeah. And so I don't think you can choose to not have that feeling about someone talking about you.
Absolutely. I cannot choose that.
Yeah.
But I can have the feeling and then make a choice after that. Does it mean that people don't like me? Does it mean this? Am I getting bamboozled? Like I can have the feeling and then I can choose what to do with it. I can choose to say, that's old wiring. I don't need it.
I think we can sum this up really easily, which is we both recognize that the people at the end who are having this beautiful emotion is beautiful.
Yeah.
And you don't mind how they got there, and I mind how they got there.
Right.
I wish it would have been something that was real. Because I think you can get people to feel that way with the truth.
But that's not a magic show.
Yeah, sure. It's so clear that it's so much of my baggage because I don't mind when people watch a movie and they feel like that and they're crying at the end and they feel seen because the movie's clear about the fact that it's fake. Like this is a story, this is a narrative. And if you get this feeling out of it, it's great because I just feel like you were up front. You're not presenting it as a documentary And that just shows how much of it's my baggage about, I mean, what's the difference between that magic show and a movie? There's none.
And it's a magic show.
Yeah.
It's not like your dad is telling you that has like made a whole trick to it.
Yeah.
It's a magic show. You are walking in knowing like
You want to be.
You're buying into that experience.
Yeah.
So you're not getting tricked. You know what you're doing when you go in there.
Yeah. I just think the simplest way to say this is it doesn't bother you at all that how they got to that beautiful emotion was through this illusion. And for me, it makes me think that emotion isn't real because it was an illusion. Yeah.
I think we just disagree on. I think illusions can become your reality. Anyway, I think it's
fucking awesome though. Let me just say that. And I loved how much you and Kristen loved it and were emotional and felt totally connected. And I think that's awesome.
It was. I would highly also on Hulu. Lots of things to watch on Hulu. And you know what? Now that I saw his name, I'm almost positive this is the person years ago when we interviewed Ira in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I saw an amazing magic show there. We were talking to Ira and we were like, oh, we're going to this magic show. Oh, I saw the best magic show last night. And he goes, yeah, he's fine, but you should really see. And I'm pretty sure it was this.
Been that.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And I'm so upset I didn't get to see that in person.
You know what I loved about it is I was like, oh, yes, the thing that Chappelle has done so successfully is happening in magic now, which is so cool. Like talk about something.
Yes.
Be funny, but talk about something for real and do magic, but tackle something.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love
the
that.
Same. Yeah. Speaking of, I think Chappelle has something new out today.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
saw something on the Instagram, but I didn't get to look at it yet.
Oh, my gosh. Your birthday buddy.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Oh.
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh, Jesus. Triple ding.
So many ding, ding, dings because in the magic show, Bill Gates is there.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I wanted to just cry even harder. I love him so much. We are doing a book talk. We're moderating a
Panel
talk.
about his new book.
We're so flattered.
Oh, my God.
Our names are on this thing?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
absurd.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Oh, I want another update. You know, when the last time this happened where we were talking about another show and you said it's like when people don't like the food you're eating, they won't shut up about it. Many people responded, there's a term for that called don't yuck my yum.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, don't yuck my yum. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Great.
So I'm sorry if I'm yucking your yum when I share my opinions about. I think it's beautiful that you.
No,
believe
you're
in
not
magic.
yucking
I
my
think it's-
yum at
Okay.
all.
Okay, good.
Okay, so Viggo, in the late 70s, an international phone call would be like $80. So I saw an ad for AT&T in an old National Geographic from the early 60s announcing direct long-distance dialing to several countries. I believe calls to the UK were around $3 per minute.
Oh my gosh.
For the first 3 minutes. France and Germany were a bit more, maybe $3.60 per minute.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember getting busted all the time in junior high. I'd like meet these girls I went to Traverse City once and I met this cute girl and then I'd talk to her on the phone and I would rack up these bills that were outrageous and I'd get totally busted. And then, that girl, Jenny Lesnowitz, I tell you about the girl I met in England. Just a landline back then. So we couldn't talk. We had to write letters. It was too expensive.
That's sweet, though.
Yeah.
Pen
But she
paling
found a
is
better
fun.
guy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because you were taking too long to write your letter?
The rugby player, remember?
Oh, yeah.
And I wrestled him and he won.
Oh, my God. Ding, ding, ding.
What? Rugby?
Yes. We talk a lot about rugby in this episode.
Yeah.
And one of my facts is, what are they saying in the haka? So
Hold on a second. Jenny Hazelton. I know another Jenny Lesnowitz. Not Jenny Lesnowitz. Jenny Hazelton. I just want to clear that up.
Okay. The haka, they say different stuff. They say different stuff. But one of them I found says, I die, I live, I die, I live, I live. This is the hairy man who fetched the sun and caused it to shine again. One upward step, another upward step.
Ooh.
An upward step, another, the sun shines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they say different stuff, but that was one of them. This must be all blacks because it says all blacks, let me become one with the land. This is our land that rumbles. It's my time. It's my moment. This defines us as the All Blacks. It's my time. It's my moment. Our dominance, our supremacy will triumph and will be properly revered, placed on high. Silver Fern, All Blacks. Silver Fern, All Blacks.
Yeah. There's only a few teams that do the haka.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the All Blacks do it. Samoa does it, and Tonga does it. I don't know if there's another one, but maybe Fiji. I don't know. I don't know what all the teams are, but yeah.
Okay, the goalie that got killed, the Colombia goalie, his name was Andre Escobar. I think Viggo even called his name
By
out.
name.
Yeah. He was killed after the aftermath of the 1994 FIFA World Cup, reportedly as retaliation for having scored an own goal, which contributed to the team's elimination from the tournament. Oh,
All right, you want to watch the haka?
Colombia. Oh, sure.
Isn't
That's
that
cool.
awesome?
It's cool.
The first couple times I saw it, I think I said that in the interview when I was in New Zealand starting to watch these games. First time I was like, this is corny. And then about halfway through, I'm like, oh, I'd be terrified. The unity of and ferocity.
Yeah. I think you also like it because you like group things.
I do. I love group dancing, synchronized dancing.
Yeah, you love that.
I really do.
It reminded me of, honestly, it was like,
Booty dancing?
cheerleading.
Oh, sure.
It just looked like a formation to me. But I really liked that the other team was holding hands and holding each other's bags.
Yeah. Mostly it's that, right? So 99% of the teams they play just have to sit there while they intimidate them. But when they play Tonga or Samoa, both teams are doing it.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
cool.
Awesome.
Very cool. I thought all the stuff that Viggo said about dementia was really interesting.
Super fascinating.
And stuff I hadn't thought about. And what I really liked, kind of a ding, ding, ding. Because what he was saying is the person who has dementia is living in their own reality. It's not real.
Right.
But
Why ruin it for them?
don't need, or just like,
Well, that's what I was
but
saying.
it's
Sorry, I
real.
yucked your yum.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, but it's real to them. So what's real?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the big question. Everything is a perception anyway. So if that's real to them, it's real.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, I really dinged that
You really tied everything into a beautiful little bow.
to a rugby ball.
Yeah, an all black
I tried
bow.
again.
Yeah.
Didn't
You went
go
too
as
far.
well.
You went back to the well, as we
Yeah.
say in comedy. One too many times.
Okie doke.
That was it? That was the facts?
That was the
That was the
facts.
facts. So it was mostly just a review of these two great pieces of content we consumed, and I encourage everyone to see it. Oh,
Yeah.
the
And you can buy tickets for both.
In and of itself is also on Hulu.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Britney one is too.
Yeah, they're both on Hulu.
Okay.
Good job, Hulu.
Love you.
Bye.